when we are live.
So we can start.
A very good afternoon to all of you. And I hope you and your families are safe and have taken the vaccination as well. I've been asked to moderate a session which on a very interesting topic this afternoon. I know it's a Friday afternoon, very good weather in Delhi, maybe rains in other places. Post-lunch sessions are normally difficult, but I think the topic will keep it very encouraging. Discussions are expected out of it. We have a very good panel today with me, and let me have the pleasure to introduce the panel members. We've got Mr. Nicky Frank, who's the CEO for South Asia for DHL Global Forwarding, who needs no introduction because DHL is a brand by itself and which makes Nicky equally aware of what is happening in the Indian market, and he's been around here for some time, and I've had the pleasure to host him in one more webinar in the past. And I know he's going to bring in a lot of value also today in our discussion. Then we have our good friend Vivek Kelly. Vivek Kelly also needs no introduction because Vivek is the founder of Team Global Logistics, which has really grown in the years. And I've seen it so closely over the last few years and his growth journey in the industry. His contribution for the inland container depots have also been really appreciated. The work that team has been doing even on the pharma side is really appreciated. Then we have Mr. Vaibhav Vora, Managing Director for Continental Carriers. The Continental Group has been there for a few generations. I've known Vaibhav and his family for many years, and I'm sure his inputs in today's discussion, given their presence and historical operations in Indian markets, will also help us in the discussion. Then we have Mr. Abhishek P. Rao, Group Director of Varuna Logistics. I think in the country today, transportation is so important, and the reality is that everyone is talking about the type of improvements that have happened in the transportation sector, as well as post GST, what we have seen in terms of how the transit times are being reduced. There's a larger focus from the CSR activities on the drivers as well and other public sectors. And with their fleet and their presence, and with Abhishek's past experience of having spoken on various forums, and I've been part of him in the ISCM's conferences as well, and I know he will bring a lot of value as well in today's discussion. So my hearty welcome to all of them, and would request that we keep this session as lively as possible because it's a very interesting subject, the highway of value for global logistics. I think amidst this global economic growth in past caused by COVID-19 pandemic and trade tensions between US and China, one industry which has been buoyant has been the logistics industry, and no one can deny that. And I think all of us on this panel have been very busy even during this pandemic, not getting an opportunity to even take breaks, but keep the cargo moving because there were a lot of essential commodities. There was pharma that was there. There were life-saving drugs. There's vaccine that have been moving. And all the action has been happening across the globe. But Asia Pacific logistics industry grew rapidly in the ASEAN region as well. And major economies like China and India have continued to grow. And there's no argument on that. Additionally, the government support for logistics sector in the region is also a factor which has now boosting the industry growth. We have seen what the logistics policies that are being released. We've seen the Indian government themselves looking at the logistics policy. Last week, we had the state of Telangana, which had released their logistics policy. Earlier, we had the Madhya Pradesh state also talking about the logistics policy. And I'm sure there are other states which will also follow. But the question today is, when the legacy players are moving towards growth for increasing the market share and expanding the products and services through inorganic growth, meanwhile, we have new players and startups who are rapidly growing and providing to be competition. And this is a debate that is really relevant, because how much of infrastructure is there in the country to how much of IT infrastructure is there to support the logistics industry. So without further delay and getting inputs, I would probably ask each of my panelists to give their initial inputs in brief on this subject, and then I will go to specific questions. So in no specific order, but I will request Nikki Frank to open the discussion. And over to you, Nikki, on your first initial inputs on the subject.
Yeah, thank you very much, Satish, for the introduction and the opening remarks. And thank you to PhD and to Ajay on behalf of PhD for the opportunity to participate in today's panel discussion. I think you touched upon a very few important topics, Satish. I think the pandemic indeed has brought logistics and supply chain in a broader sense a lot more into the focus. I mean, I see this in my personal life. I also see this in a lot of discussions with customers, but also with colleagues from the trade. In the past, logistics and supply chain sometimes have been, disregarded, or not a lot of attention has been paid to them, and this has changed tremendously over the last 18 months. Suddenly, everybody talks about logistics. News about the Suez Canal being blocked, or port congestions, or spiking freight rates make it even into mainstream media, which we haven't seen too much about in the past. And I'm not saying all of that press is good for logistics, but it's certainly given a boost to the image of logistics and supply chain. It's no longer only about cost efficiency and savings. It's a lot about resilience, reliability, new solutions, safety, and also about life-saving delivery. So I think this is very positive development over the last 18 months or so. Just a few thoughts on the current situation and the way forward, which we can then touch upon a few of those in the Q&A and the panel discussion. I think right now, freight rates and cost is something that's on everybody's mind. Every shipper, every consignee is worried about the current market situation. We are seeing extremes in the market, be it in the air freight market, be it in the ocean freight market, and doesn't really matter which area in the world you look at. We are seeing severe constraints on the capacity. We're seeing, by and large, demand by far outstripping supply, and that has led to large imbalances, and thereby to huge spikes in the freight rates, which is having its own impact. It's not just impacting directly the P&Ls of the shippers and the consignees, but it's impacting the industry overall in a couple of ways. And thereby, I think it's not just a problem for these individual companies, but for example, for us as a country or as a region in South Asia and in India overall. We see diversions of trade flows. We see carriers allotting capacity to the highest paying trade routes, putting other regions, and I count India and South Asia as part of that, at the disadvantage. We see that freight rates are spiking predominantly on the China-US route, on the China-Europe route, and carriers are diverting their capacity away from other intra-Asia trade lanes, the India trade lane, to make sure that they can maximize the capacity on those rates, or on those routes where they get the highest pay. Now, hopefully that is just a short-term phenomenon, but it certainly is having an impact on Indian customers and on Indian businesses right now. And we as a trade, we need to find a way how to mitigate that and how to help our customers in this situation. I think this should, on the other hand, not lead us to believe that the role of India and South Asia in when it comes to logistics and trade going forward is anyway less than what it used to be, right? And the projections that were there in the past, I think, are still very much valid. I mean, economic forecasts, growth forecasts vary, and they are changed basically with every wave of the pandemic hitting the country now. But I think fundamentally, the macroeconomics are still the same, and we can expect a significant increase in growth in India and the sub-region. And logistics and supply chain has to play a major role to facilitate that growth. And therefore, it is also, it remains important for all the players to do their part in the industry. That also includes the government and the authorities in terms of, committing to infrastructure investments, not stopping any of those right now because there, might be short-term diversions. Some companies may be shifting their production location, etc. I think we need to hold the course there and continue to improve the ease of doing business, the increase the efficiency when it comes to logistics in the region, and also, pushing for better infrastructure. And a last point I would mention in that regard is also this includes investing into new talent and into the development of our future workforce, right? With logistics coming more into the limelight now, it's also made it a lot more attractive for new employees, for talents. They suddenly look at logistics as a possible area for employment. But the profile in logistics also is changing from, while it, especially in freight forwarding, it was sufficient to have a telephone or maybe a telefax. Nowadays you need to have data understanding, data capabilities. We have a lot more data analysts in the business than we used to have in the past. And with these profiles for these talents, we are competing not just within the industry, but we are competing with other industries like the high-tech industry, the retail industry, and many others. And that is something where, as a logistics industry, we also need to, continue to invest into that development to attract these people to further drive the development of the trade. So there's just a couple of initial thoughts on the current situation and important aspects for the way forward from my side.
Thank you, Nikki. I think you've touched upon a lot of points. I've made note of them. You've touched upon resilience, reliability, freight rates, current market scenarios, South Asia, protection, macroeconomics, the employee aspect, and I'm not too surprised because I've got two boys, and the first one didn't want to come into supply chain, and he's gone on to the computer side, and I was not too surprised. But in the last 2 months, my son the second one is looking at supply chain. So I'm a little more happy that someone in the family is at least looking at it. So I think we'll touch base on the importance of people and talent later. So I'll move to Vivek now, before I move to the other freight forwarding person there. So maybe Vivek, your initial thoughts before I go to Vaibhav.
Yeah. So thank you, Satish. And of course, thank you, PhD, for organizing this conference on this very important topic. So when we say highway of value, so I think the value is creation of value. And for the creation of value, one has to see the value. So I think we will dwell on, those opportunities of value creation in the logistics, in the later part of the session. But initial thoughts would be, of course, the pandemic and the opportunities and the challenges it has brought forward. So some of the challenges, have already been highlighted by Nikki. I think what pandemic has done is it has greatly speeded up the process of digitalization. So be it only and not only at in the private sector, but also in the government sector. So all of a sudden, something which was not achievable, it has been achievable. I mean, just to take an example, in the Indian context, the customs are now permitting faceless examination. So without a presence of a custom officer, the examination can happen. The lines don't want you to come to their office for releasing a bill of lading. They're most happy to do electronic bill of lading releasing. The shippers are sending their documents, the invoice packing list, to the freight forwarders or the so-called the clearing agents in electronic format. So various things are happening, and it has greatly brought about so-called what we've been trying to, prophesize and wanting to achieve for a long time, for almost a decade now, is the paperless transactions. So paperless transactions have actually, been achieved, but it is not in a full digital way. Paperless transactions are happening is that you are just from a physical paper, we have moved to PDF files. But the real, digitalization will happen when systems start talking to each other using EDIs and APIs. But when we see more and more emails flowing, and when the data is not manageable, then organizations, they really want to get into the so-called the API way, or the EDI way in exchanging information. So I think that's as the pandemic progresses, and we know that in the next coming it's not going to go away. The impact of pandemic is going to be there for a long term, and this is the new normal is here for to stay. And in the new normal, the data interchange is something that everybody has been talking about, and it's been driven by the sheer requirement of the situation. Second point, is on the infrastructure. Of course, Nikki did mention that we need to have an improved infrastructure. I think what we see, a disconnect here, and which I think needs to be highlighted and needs to be discussed in detail, is the hardware and the software. Logistics hardware and software have to go together. So what we have seen is typically, if you see in our neighbors, like if you take the airline industry, the Dubai Emirates is an example how it has grown. So they grew the airport, the seaport, the airline, and now with the DP World, acquiring various feeder operators, etc. So they are going in tandem with each other. So the hardware and the software, they have to move together. The hardware is the terminals, the warehouses, the ships, the containers, and the software is the logistics service providers who are on these panels. And they bring in, basis this hardware or basis this logistics infrastructure, where they design solutions basis that. Unless and until they are not talking to each other, you can continue to create an infrastructure, but it may not be of any use, because we have not considered the latest requirement of the trade or of the industry or of the consumers while designing that. So I think that is one area. I think India, there is a better opportunity, because what we have seen is there's a huge amount of port terminals privatization has happened, but whereas on parallelly to go with that, the Indian Airlines in terms of cargo cabin carrying capacity, or the shipping lines, we are talking about the privatization of ACI. The carrying capacity of the carriers has not grown. So what has happened is, which also is very important to highlight here, is that our dependence on foreign carriers, be it airlines, be it shipping lines, is huge. And when it, if you really want to, make the maximum out of this value creation, and opportunity that is being available, unless and until you don't have control over your carrying capacity, because you manufacture goods but you don't have the wherewithal to carry those goods, you are still dependent on somebody else. And then as rightly identified some time back by Nikki, that the capacity is being shifted somewhere where people are willing to pay a higher freight, and that is at the cost of Indian export goods not being available. I'm hearing stories about some shipping, especially the commodities which are low value goods. They are not able to meet the requirements of shipments, because they just are not getting the containers, or the cost of carrying the cargo is much higher than the value of the goods themselves. So we are missing out on the opportunity of exporting, especially the low value goods, the commodities. So so these are the challenges in terms of the development going forward, as to the hardware and software have to speak to each other, and so that viable logistics solutions can be derived or implemented. So that's very briefly on the opening remarks, Satish. Over to you.
Perfect, Vivek. I think you brought in a lot of points in terms of the value creation, faceless and paperless EDI infrastructure. But I think one very important aspect is the relevant stakeholders of hardware, software, and looking at it as a collaborative approach of all looking at it. I think that we should debate a little later in the session. And you talked about the dependency of the foreign carriers. And I've always believed that India is losing that opportunity of becoming the hub in Asia and allowing it to slip from India to Middle East rather than staying in India. And if you look at today, the airlines or the shipping lines, the Indian flag carriers are not really the mainstream carriers for our business. And carriers like Emirates, Qatar, Etihad, we are dependent on the Middle East carriers much more than the normal carriers. So I think we'll come back on that. before I go into, APR, I will go to Vaibhav. Vaibhav, maybe your initial thoughts before I get to specific questions.
No, thank you, Satish. Thank you for having me here. And I think, Vivek and Nikki really said or pretty much expressed a lot that was in my mind with regard to, what should be the context in today's discussion. But one more thing today, as Nikki pointed out earlier, was that, there is now a definite interest towards strong advice being sought after from LSPs today in the business. This was something that was always in the back end. And while again being in a family business ecosystem, we've been sort of promoting this kind of advice to customers for a very long time to suggest slight cost-cutting initiatives that would bring in efficiencies in supply chains. But obviously, people would be concerned more about the raw material cost, and services was always looked at, as a secondary function. It was something that was a commodity. It literally had got commoditized, to be very honest, in a manner, that this is a commoditized service and it's going to be at X price and this is how it's going to move forward. In fact, that's why you see a lot of digitization coming in, because it comes in with that similar commoditized thought process. But in this pandemic time, good, bad, ugly, whatever may be the case, what has come to highlight is the actual need and requirement of logistics solution providers or consultants or partners per se that have played a part in bringing efficiencies to the supply chain, especially at a time where there were infrastructural issues, there was process-based issues, because again, you had pandemic playing in almost every part of the world, and you had to improvise quite suddenly to plan out your cards and really manage the supply chain. So at some point, you had to really be on your toes. While us as logisticians, we're pretty much on our toes 24/7. And as you mentioned, there hasn't been a day off since April last year for all of us. We've pretty much been on the ball. But for the first time, we've seen that there has been some relevance or thought process been given to standardization of packaging, for example, how to cut down costs in terms of air freight packaging that people would never really think about historically, because everybody was more bothered about, say, for the pharmaceutical sector, the API imports, and they never really wondered how would they operate with geopolitical situations arising, with increased surveillance from certain countries for products coming into India. In fact, moving forward now under the ambit of Atmanirbhar Bharat and manufacturing and PLIs being distributed, how are they going to connect, supply chains from various parts of the country into, say, like a Bihar, where they want to build a garment tech manufacturing hub for exporters. So for relevance and for all sakes of discussions, we started seeing that as a very good value. I mean, again, it's you got to look at the positives in all situations that you're surrounded in, but the pandemic has definitely brought logistics intelligence or knowledge to the forefront, which has actually led to and I would like to highlight at which pace you've seen now the coming up of logistics as a discipline, as an independent department within commerce. While it was always in progress, it was always something that was in discussion. I've seen that as the multidisciplinary body act more in line with what is needed. Because today, bringing multiple disciplines, multiple ministries all together to create a unanimity or a smooth process is not an easy task, but that's so necessary. Because in today's ecosystem, if you are looking at creating jobs, you are looking at creating manufacturing as an industry higher than 12% of GDP in your local ecosystem, you need to do that. So those are the positives that are there in the pandemic. And obviously, as Vivek mentioned, the automation that has been brought in. India operated in a time of crisis, and I think Asia operated at a time of crisis, or the world operated in time of crisis, and has really brought about a lot of automation in something which was extremely driven on paper proof and paper evidence, but still it's a long journey ahead, and there has to be play moving forward. And one very deliberable, one point that I think it deserves deliberation is today for businesses, conventional businesses are operating on cash flow valuations, and you've got the new age tech businesses which are operating on tech valuations, and now that's competing against each other as we are moving forward. So it's interesting to see where that will merge and business will operate, because you'll have to see where you fit. Either you're going to go in the cash flow valuation game business, or are you in the tech valuation game business on how you're going to move forward. So, I mean, these are some thoughts that I'd like to put on the table for our discussions today.
Perfect. I think some important points that came up was the Make in India and Atmanirbhar aspect that was there as a positive. Industry coming under Ministry of Commerce, surely, because this was a fight that I know has been there for 3 decades. Maybe it started with your grandfather and your father and now you. Probably your children will see the end of the tunnel, hopefully, sort of a thing. Cash flow definitely is a big subject, and the valuation. Nikki, anyhow, did give me these inputs as well, off when we were discussing. So I think it's quite an interesting discussion that we will have before I move on to my good friend APR, because what is so critical today is the expectation of our end customers never-endingly increasing day by day. And that's some subject that we will also discuss. So over to you, APR, for your initial input before I get to specific questions.
Hey, thanks, Satish. Hello, everyone. I hope all of us are safe and families are safe. Yeah, I think in the white paper that Satish shared, he sort of preempted a 2 to 3 year timeline for COVID to get over. Yeah, Satish, I don't know what to say on that, but yeah, okay, let's prepare for the worst, right, as they say. So, as part of the risk mitigation plans, I think all of our businesses have taken a beating, and some of us have come out of that, right? So the way I look at it is that over the last year and 4-5 months now, we've all learned so many lessons. Yeah, there was a time when people were supposed to be at work, and at work meant in the office. I think times have changed now. We've understood that people can work remotely. Yeah? COVID has forced us to understand that. And there are a lot of disadvantages and advantages of that, right? So we all end up saving a lot of costs in terms of our OPEXs. Yeah? CAPEXs we just can't do without. Yeah, we just need to have that presence. But OPEXs we really end up saving, traveling costs, yeah, etc. And there are disadvantages to it as well, right? A lot of industries can't function. A lot of industries that can't function end up influencing our P&Ls as well, right? So the lesson learned from that was survival of the fittest. Something very, very, I would say, ancient, that we've all been taught by our ancestors and our forefathers, that survival of the fittest is critical. So we've all learned those lessons, I believe. We are all functioning within the ambit of Corona. And I believe whether it takes 2 to 3 years to normalize or whether it just stays like that, God alone knows. Yeah, time will tell. But supply chain can't stop. Supply chains can't stop, rather. Sorry. Yeah. So we have to keep our spirits up. We have to keep getting vaccinated. Number of times the vaccine is out there. Yeah, and we've got to be there out on the field and support all our economies and the global economy. And I believe that this has made us stronger as human beings. This has made us stronger as supply chain people. And like I think Vaibhav mentioned about it as well, that the government has taken notice of it. Incidentally, they started taking notice of it a bit before COVID, but I think it has gained faster traction during the COVID period. Yeah. There's a task force set up and various associations. I think Vaibhav is part of the French Chamber. I'm part of the FICCI, and also the PhD Chamber. And all these associations are working towards supporting the government in bringing about the right policies and bringing about the right changes. And I recollect one incident, Satish and everyone, that a lot of trucks were being halted on the highways because of certain directives given by the ministry. And since there's always gray areas, around any policy matters, yeah, and at the end of the day, on the ground, people have to ensure the best possible implementation. So courtesy that, a lot of trucks stopped coming into cities, and supply chains were getting disrupted. But in the nick of time, associations like the PhD Chamber, FICCI, and various other associations stepped up along with the corporates and ensured that the ministries were informed about it. And finally, they were able to take some quick actions, and we did not have stockouts of critical products in cities and towns and districts. So I think that was a wonderful thing that happened courtesy all these associations. So thank you, everyone. And I would say, let's start, Satish.
Okay. No, good. I think you touched upon survival of the fittest. The SCM can't stop or supply chains can't stop. People became much stronger. The aspect of work from home, Zoom became much and part and parcel of our life now. And without Zoom, we can't survive. And for someone like me who has to run a business for South Asia and also to sometimes moderate sessions, it's thanks to digitalization that I've done over 170 webinars in the last 17 months. And my prediction was very clear, and why I wrote in the white paper also was that when March 17th, I know the date precisely, I took a transfer, or I requested for a transfer from Bombay to Delhi, and people said, you will come back. And I said, I'm not coming back, and this will be my last trip to Bombay, mark my words. People did not believe me that day, and I'm still telling them, boss, you see now after 17 months, I've still not come back to Bombay for a day. And which is why I'm saying that given the size of population that we have, forget the third wave or the fourth wave, my gut feeling is that it's here to stay. And even that's the unfortunate thing. Them on, but now you first look for your mask and then you go for it, So I know things have changed. So what I will do is that I'll go with Nikki first. And my first question to you today on this, highway and the value proposition that Asia can bring, given that you have large manufacturing hubs of the world in India now, which were not in Europe. Earlier, everything we would see in Europe. The largest populating countries are in the world are in Asia. Unfortunately or fortunately, between the demand and the hubs are here. And the role that we can play as logistic service providers, or the ICD CFS operators or the truckers, is becoming more prominent. And people now, like what APR mentioned or anyone mentioned, it's that more and more people want to come into supply chain. So my question could be that what else as a player can we do? Because I know as DHL or as Agility or as Continental, we are doing a lot of things. We are going beyond just being a logistic service provider. But my question would be: is what is the other support function that we can give in this difficult time to the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question, Satish. I think I would start with some general comments and then make it more specific to the currently prevailing situations. I think logistics in general, as you said, has an important support role for trade globally and for businesses specifically, right? I mean, we typically follow our customers, or actually, in some cases, we even move earlier than our customers, because logistics has to be where our customers' businesses are. We have to be where production sites are, and we have to be where the consumers are, because we are the interface between the two, the one who connects A to B, basically. So, if production centers shift, within a country or within a region or even globally, logistics has to be very fast in accommodating that and following that. And if this is about inland locations, then obviously providing ICDs, providing rail connections, providing highway connections. Similarly, on a larger scale and on a longer term scale, providing seaports and airports to cater for those production and consumption centers. Now, while this is generally happening, I think what we see in the current scenario and the current situation, we see a lot of businesses being constrained. And I think both Vivek and Vaibhav touched upon it as well. we really see Indian exporters being hampered, right? These are some startup businesses, some already longer established businesses. Some of them have invested into expanding their production capacity. We also have multinational companies who have set up production facilities in India, and all of a sudden they are constrained in their ability to ship out of India because of the prevailing constraints in the capacity and in the equipment. And that is where logistics players like us have a crucial role, because it is, these companies are in a way at the mercy of the carriers, the airlines, and the logistics providers to help them get their goods out of the country and obviously their imported raw material or components into the country. And in the current scenario, for us, it's a clear task of prioritization and of coming up with out-of-the-box solutions. So, in normal times, you might have your standard seaport or your standard airport. You might have your standard packaging provider, and that's good when all things work normally. But in the current scenario, we need to also provide our customers with alternative solutions. So if they used to ship out of Nhava Sheva, but there's congestion or there's blank sailings or there's no equipment available, we need to come up with alternatives and help them get the equipment from somewhere else, bring it to their factory for the stuffing and get it out. Or if some of their raw materials from China, if there's no capacity or the freight rates are prohibitively high to get that raw material in, we need to help them find alternatives. Obviously, we can't do the sourcing for them. They need to find the alternative suppliers, but we can help them with the freight solutions, also help them in terms of modal shifts, adapting their supply chains in a way to say, some of your consumption markets might be closed right now. So rather than shipping air freight, you can also look at a sea freight solution. So your goods are out of your warehouse, it doesn't get congested, and they are on the sea for a longer time. So by the time they arrive, things might have opened up. Or similarly on multimodal solutions, we have to find ways to overcome the bottlenecks in the supply chain, and I think that's an exciting job for us, and it's a very rewarding job, even though it's extremely challenging in the current circumstances.
Perfect, Nikki. I think you touched upon aspect of consumption, constraints, current scenarios, standard versus alternatives, the China versus what else. And I think that's an important subject that will come, is that are we too dependent on China that we can't find alternatives even for our APIs as of today in this country or in any other part of it, and the model shift that we should be looking, and the multimodal aspect. So I'll come back to a little more questions, but then I think I'll go to Vivek, because he's seen the Indian industry so closely that every time when you see your capacity demand has typically been very lopsided of west versus east, which what I mean by that is that even today your dependency on your Mundras, Nhava Shevas, all the seaports being there, and even if you want to get into a Nagpur today from Asia, you will still try and bring the container all the way into Nhava Sheva and put it on a train and take it into locations like central India. And probably the east is a little more less covered, or we consider east is not so efficient in terms of speed and rest of them, for whatever reason. It could be a mindset, with no offense to anyone. Maybe you can throw some more light in terms of whether the chicken comes first or the egg comes first, in terms of infrastructure should have come much faster in this country in certain places, or the private players should have been allowed to be more participative against the constraints that are. Maybe you can throw some light, Vivek.
Yeah, so we had to go back into the history a bit. As you know that the British Raj was actually was operating out of Calcutta, which is east of India. And Calcutta, along with Dhaka, was one of the important trading centers, and the textiles that moved out of that part of the country was much earlier than the so-called mills came into Gujarat and in Maharashtra. So traditionally, yes, that was, you know, a trade center. But then, you know, at some point of time, the Raj headquarters shifted to Delhi, because the seat of power in India, whoever was ruling Delhi, you know, they considered them to be the rulers. So, you know, so it was more of a, what do you say, optics, that they moved from there to Delhi after the first War of Independence, 1857. But then thereafter, for a long time, the British, I mean, the English companies continued to operate out of West Bengal post partition. It was only when at some part of time in the 70s, when the communists came to power, at that time a lot of things changed, and somehow that part of the the progress that was to happen, you know, in that part of the country did not really happen in terms of industrialization. And since there was no industrialization, you know, it didn't require movement of goods. Of course, it is rich in, you know, when it comes to minerals and other you know, stuff that is available. So it's a very mineral rich belt. But the infrastructure that got developed was only for moving those, you know, what do you say, raw material and so-called the semi-finished goods, you know, that moved out of that. So and it was, you know, and especially the so-called the industrial policy up to liberation in 1990s did not really permit the Indian industries to grow. So those industries which were there, you know, the Tatas in Jamshedpur and the other Birlas who were operational, you know, in that part of the country, they were only, you know, catering to the Indian market. They were really not, designed, or they were not, policy did not permit them to, you know, cater to the global market. So that's how that, you know, area remained undeveloped. But whereas, you know, over a period of, the industrialization, because of the policies especially in Maharashtra and Gujarat in the 70s, 80s, the creation of industrial development corporations, the MIDC, GIDC, you know, it really increased the industrialization. And of course, a lot of, because of better industrial relationships that was existing in this part of the country, a lot of industries shifted there. So entrepreneurs, you know, they found this, and of course there was because of a lot of education institutions being in this part of the country, there were a lot of manpower available in terms of engineers, etc. So a lot of industries, you know, were created in this part of. So I mean, coming back to your argument, I mean, or the point that you highlighted, it's the east part of the country. They really did not get that, there was no incentive for people to put up infrastructure, nor was the government very, you know, proactive when it comes to that. But now the things are changing. You know, I think one of the important developments that we saw was Krishnapatnam, you know, was a greenfield, terminal that came up, and thanks to the AP government at that time. And now, of course, it is taken over by Adani's. So that is now, you know, is proving to be a transshipment port for cargo that is originating from Bangladesh. And I think there is a huge opportunity for that to develop further. So on what we are seeing that is that, you know, east is coming up very fast. The dedicated freight corridor 2, which connects north to east, is already, you know, in advanced stages of completion. So in next maximum two years, it will get completed. And then there are 4 more freight corridors which have been planned. So, you know, and then that also connects east to the south part of India, and then some of them intersect the central India. So yes, it is there in paper, and in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see the hinterland connectivity also happening. Parallelly, the ports in Visakhapatnam is already privatized, and the Bakshis are handling it, and Krishnapatnam, Navyu Corporation was handling it, and now it's with Adani's. The Ennore and the Kattupalli port is also there in South India, in Chennai, are doing well. So, and of course, there's a huge amount of inland water transport, that's happening between, in East India, and we are using rivers of Bangladesh to connect to the northeast part of it. So I think this particular government, has identified, those gaps and whatever they could, identify from, the efforts are now put in for movement of the local goods within India. I mean, Northeast India via Bangladesh into other part of India. And there's some development that's happening in terms of the port terminals. With this dedicated freight corridors and other infrastructure, the national highways coming up, also, port connectivity is also happening as we speak. So in the next 5 to 10 years, this infrastructure is going to come up, and it is going to compete with the west coast of India. I mean, if you notice, the Kia plant was set up in AP using Chennai as the gateway. Why was it not set up in this part of the country? So of course the Koreans saw something positive there. That is the reason they set up that plant. So so I think it's just a matter of time. The west had a head start, but east we will catch up soon. And I have given you enough and more instances to highlight as to why east is going to catch up soon.
No, I think you probably bought out the best in terms of starting from the East India Company, because, and knowing you, I thought you were the best person to answer this, because you will be keen to know on all the policy decisions, because you're fond of investing and looking at new opportunities. So I'm glad that I put the question rightly to you, and you brought out the best out of it. And you touched upon so many aspects that really say what the government is trying to do. I'm neither represent any political party, but I think it's important that logistics industry gets its due importance at the right time, and which is happening now. And I think the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, where 93,000 crores is what is anticipated to be spent, is a lot of money. And if that happens, given the fact that Delhi-Mumbai is the third busiest air route in the world, with over 170 flights a day when it was pre-COVID days, clearly says that if you have better road and infrastructure, people would not mind even going by road at some point of time, clearly. So you've touched upon it. So I'll now come to first let me come to APR, because you've been a part of a lot of these associations and rest of them. How critical is India's role in the Asia story? Because any country's growth predominantly depends on how the government support in terms of free trade policies, SEZs, how much do they care really in terms of infrastructure and rest of them. And what could be those policy changes that you may be looking at, say, starting from this year or next year, really for Asia or India to become a larger contributor, both in terms of the global trade as well as probably in Asia? A few policy changes that you may want to consider.
Thanks, Satish, for that. See, I think coming straight to the point, and in the interest of time, I think transparency is a very important policy change that I would like to look at. Yeah. So transparency is a very important policy change, and the government is doing its bit in terms of tying up with the right partners for digitalization. Right? They are also talking to industries and experts and various associations, and be it McKinsey's or Accenture's or ENY's or knowledge partners, basically. So yes, that is being worked upon. Along with transparency, standardization is a very, very key aspect when we talk about India contributing to Asia or to the global economy, or India growing in that sense. So unless and until there's standardization, I don't see optimal growth happening in the country. And by standardization, if I have to talk about the subject that I represent and the company that I represent, Varuna Group of Companies. So let's say if I say trucks. Yeah. So well before independence, trucks were designed in this country basis the highest contributor of GDP, which was agriculture. Yeah. So all trucks were designed for agriculture, to carry apples and sugarcane and onions and grapes, etc., etc. Yeah. So though the contribution of agriculture has reduced in the GDP, or I would say other sectors have started hugely contributing, yet you see the same truck type moving around. Yeah. So the utilization of trucks, therefore, is lower. Your per kilo cost, your per liter cost, your unit of measurement, whatever it is, is always going to be low. Your supply chains are going to be slower than what it can be, because your transit times are going to get affected. If I talk about a standard transit time in the country, it's about 350 kilometers a day, right? So we all, I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of my brothers and sisters from the fraternity always blamed the government, saying infrastructure nahi, infrastructure nahi. I agree that there is a challenge on infrastructure, but it is work in progress. And as industry representatives, we all have to do our bit with all associations, and there are people who are doing it. But we can't only blame the rest of the world. We've got to take some onus on ourselves as well, right? How much are we talking about standardization? How much are we promoting that topic, right? How much are we pushing that particular point? Why are we still using the same Punjab body trucks, the same open body trucks? Why is sugarcane is equal to dairy? Why is dairy is equal to juices? Why are we not having the right truck types moving in the country? And why will not there be a challenge of demand and supply? Satish, I recollect Mr. Sivasailam, the erstwhile Special Secretary of Logistics. I was sitting in his chamber and he said, APR, we've got to work together on building this model where demand and supply is as mitigated as possible. And he was hinting at supporting F&V marketplaces, right? So he said, we're creating this back-end infrastructure of technology and transparency and ENAM, the national marketplace, etc. So all of that, but I want you, the logisticians, to ensure that there is enough supplies. I said, Mr. Sivasailam, it is not going to happen. It is not a plug and play. It is not a quick fix. You have apple season in Himachal. Yeah, all truckers are going to move in that direction, right? Absolutely. You have onions coming in from Nasik. People are going to move there. You have wheat grain coming from Sihor in that season. People are going to move there. So wherever they move from will obviously have a fall in supply. And when there's a fall in supply, prices are going to go up. And that is because your truck designs are because of agriculture as its base product. And times have changed. Now you have FMCG, you have automotive, you have, so you have car carriers, for example. But in FMCG, in food and beverages and dairy, you have the same type of trucks. So standardization definitely is very, very important. I think we can learn many lessons from international trade where there's a fair amount of standardization, right? So transparency, standardization were two key aspects where I feel that it will allow India to actually be where it deserves to be, both in the global space and in the Asian market as well.
No, brilliant. I think why I like the word standardization also is that from where Nikki comes or Vivek comes or I come, today multimodal cannot be called multimodal unless you have a bit of standardization of 40 feet at least at some level really. And then I'll go to Vaibhav, because today we don't even talk about palletization standardization, unfortunately. Yeah. And Nikki must be shocked after seeing how Germany looks at everything in palletization to India looking at everything in loose boxes, and Russia is somewhere in between where we still send in loose boxes. So I think the biggest takeaway in terms of Indian policy and the rest of them, I think next week there's a call with E&Y also. But to be very honest and respectful to all the consulting companies, I think Vivek or all of us on the panel or some of us can be good consulting firms in terms of really giving you live situations to companies, because it's ultimately our inputs which are put on PowerPoint and presented to the government, with no offense to them. And so no disrespect to anyone them, but I think which is why this panel is so important. I think standardization and transparency definitely, I would say, has come on the custom side, like what we said in the opening remarks, because spacelessness and all that Vivek mentioned as well. That's seeing a good thing. So maybe I'll go now to
Satish, yeah. Before you proceed, just a quick point to add. So when we say transparency, and if we look at the entire supply chain, end to end. So right from the time you bring in raw materials till the time, let's say, the reverse logistics of defective happens. Let's say, let's look at the entire supply chain. It is so disconnected. Forget about intermodal in terms of forward logistics. Yeah. Overall, from the data movement perspective, it is so disconnected. So you have customs where there is transparency. The moment it gets offloaded at the port, beyond that, some people have a GPS device, some don't have a GPS device. Then it moves on to a warehouse. Some people have an SAP, some have some WMS, some have nothing. They still are on their books. Yeah, and then it further moves on. So when you actually look at the entire supply chain, I think what the government needs to insist with private operators and all operators is this bit of transparency and standardization together. So tying up all the parts and bits and pieces of the supply chain, and only then will HUL, for example, be able to predict that, okay, my retail POS is now connected. I know throughout the country how many Colgates or how many shampoos have been consumed on a day, within a month, within a quarter, and then predictability will take over the erratic demand supply planning that we all love doing, right? So that is a point that I wanted to add.
No, I think Vivek had to give some input. Go ahead, Vivek, before I go to...
Yeah, Satish, just a quick one. I think one of the things which APR has brought up in standardization, one interesting development has happened in terms of the equipments, the rolling stock, the transport equipment to be precise. The e-commerce and the policy has driven one type of truck that is widely used in the country. That is a 32 feet CBT single axle. I think that is a piece of truck. I mean, that's a piece of transport equipment that has become so popular because, of course, the single axle benefits that it has in terms of maintenance, in terms of policy, the cost, etc., and in terms of its capacity to carry the goods. And normally, all the e-commerce goods are lighter because of the heavy packing also, I mean, involved in it, and the nature of the goods. So there we have seen one development in terms of how that particular transport equipment has evolved to be the choice of truck, so-called, which is driving the e-commerce industry in a big way. Yeah. So just to add some, or share some knowledge and information.
No, brilliant. So maybe I'll go to Vaibhav. If there's any other policy decision that you probably or you would like to see, or you comment upon anything in terms of standardization before I go back to Nikki.
So in terms of standardization, there's definitely a lot of room for improvement in terms of looking at palletization, as Nikki mentioned, and as APR also mentioned. We're talking about infrastructure, trucks, and so on and so forth. I think that's a lot to do with the available infrastructure for truck docking, loading, unloading, and those kind of facilities. If I talk about even the goods, like you're talking about palletization in, say, Germany, you see availability of ground handling equipment at airports is something which is extremely common across all airports in Europe. I think it's something which is available historically because of just how matured the aviation market is per se, or how the traditional the shipping industry has been in these countries. And when you talk about India, you still have questions of the right amount, the right forklift available at airports. I mean, do we have Hydra cranes available, Hydra equipment available everywhere to carry out loading, unloading practices, to be able to bring in other standardizations to the movement of goods. So in terms of overall standardization, I know that there is still weights and measures that is being put in. I think the nodal body has been talking about somewhat of a palletization mechanism that companies such as CHEP and Brambles does on a global level. They've been wanting to bring that into India. They have been talking about it, but it's still yet to see light of day. There is policy on the customs side that needs improvement on standardization of palletization. So you see, a lot of these pallets are reusable pallets that need to be moved in and out of India. Today, under 10494 of customs, the identification piece is something which is a huge requirement. Now, this pallet has to be identified. Now, you tell me a pallet which is going to be reused again and again, can it retain a mark on a number on it? Out of 5 handlings or 6 handlings, will it not get repainted after the 3rd handling or 4th handling? How do you bring in standardization pallets which are reusable on an eco-friendly green channel methodology, setback world over, where companies have a leasing model built around it, across the world, like Enviro trainers or trainers across the world, right? So expensive equipment can definitely have label and marking or numbers associated on it. But what do you do about the cheap reusable pallets, the bins, the trays that need to be brought in and put again through the system or move freely across, the bond mechanisms that exist today in the country? You have to have a continuous bond at every port of entry. Why not a national bond that allows you to get this into the country and move across any gateway? Because the goods can move out of one country, it's India. It has to be across any gateway, whether it's brought in on a sea route out of, say, Nhava Sheva, where it has 10,000 pallets in a container, and when it is exported individually from every gateway via using air freight or ocean freight for these pallets, is there a way to bring in one standardization that puts it? So the policy has to be overarching, maybe somewhere even in the NLP, where this needs to be discussed as to how the standardization can be reflected down to every department, not just from the transport side, but also from a customs perspective, because this is EXIM frame we are talking about. So with EXIM trade itself, there needs to be free movement of these items. So how do you bring that standardization in? So, I mean, that's my two cents on the standardization piece.
No, brilliant. The reason why this becomes very important is that the topic today in respect to Asia and the rest of them is then also the aspect of government harping upon and saying that how do you bring down your cost together? You can't bring down your cost together by asking a freight forwarder or an other operator to bring down their cost, because bringing down agency fee of a freight forwarder is not going to bring down the overall cost anyhow. Let's aspect the reality. And why this subject becomes so very important is once you standardize and you may put certain policy guidelines and say that the MHEs have to be made available even with people like us or at the terminal operators or at the airport, then overall then your number of touch points in the supply chain will be reduced. And the moment you reduce the number of touch points, automatically the cost comes down. And that is why I think the standardization aspect becomes important. But let me go back to Nikki on an important aspect is that today, why India has always had this issue of no standardization and no MHEs and no palletization and the rest of them is we considered our labor very cheap for many years. We did not have the type of right educated people and training that the need was there. And I think Nikki touched upon the aspect of having the talent pool, which is not only sensible enough to understand what the industry looks at and how valuable is the cargo, but also how friendly are they to the real world of the new IT world that is coming and hitting them like it's going to hit them stronger than the coronavirus for a reason is that it could almost remove one layer of people. And that is my hard feeling that I may will be looking, very straightforward and upright talking on it. But if we are not there to the reality of the talent pool that we have to build, not only within the organization and outside, probably we will not even exist at some point of time. So I think, Nikki, you should be probably throwing more light on the importance of talent pool, people, and how prepared we need to really bring Asia to India or to South Asia.
Yeah, thanks, Satish. Maybe allow me before I get to that, just to add one thought to what the colleagues and Vivek was saying on the standardization. I also do see an opportunity there for India to leapfrog, right? Like probably the country, like many other developing countries, have leapfrogged in technologies, for example, with mobile phones, right? Many countries, didn't go the traditional way of, moving through landlines and then 2G, 3G, 4G, now 5G coming. I think in some aspects, if I see the mobile penetration and also mobile business penetration in India, it's way ahead of what you see in Europe. By mobile payments, we're nowhere near what we do in India when I compare this with countries in Europe. And when it comes to, for example, sustainable packaging, right? Standardized sustainable packaging, reusable packaging, I think this is an opportunity also to do that leapfrogging. We don't have to go the way to, standard packaging, standard pellets right now, while other parts of the world are looking more and more into sustainable solutions. So I think there is an opportunity for India to catch two flies in one stroke, with doing this standardization as well as the sustainability aspect in it. But I don't think it'll happen necessarily only through a market drive. This needs government guidance and government intervention, because at least in the beginning, there will be an imbalance in terms of the cost aspect, the economical aspects of it. And in order to bring the trade into this and to, in a way, get this started, you need some incentives or some policy changes there. That just as an additional thought on the standardization part. Now, looking at the talent question or the talent topic you mentioned and the changing requirements, I completely agree with that view. And I interestingly see this also if I compare our setup as DHL in India versus a lot of other countries. Traditionally, we had a huge advantage of the cheap labor cost, right? Like other developing countries, especially in Asia or in Latin America as well. But we see this changing because the new labor is digital. I mean, we see RPAs, we see robots, we see artificial intelligence algorithms taking over part of the work that we are doing today with employees. And this doesn't matter anymore whether you have the robot run in the US or in Europe or in Asia. The cost is the same. It's basically just you need a server and you need electricity and a bit of bandwidth. So there is a certain risk because also we in the past we could say, well, maybe two not as highly trained and skilled employees that are very cheap are good enough to substitute a highly trained and skilled employee in the Western world. And it would still be way cheaper for a company to just throw additional manpower at it in cheap labor environments. Compared to the digital competition there, to bots and RPAs and other things, the quality of these digital solutions is much better, right? They don't make mistakes. They work 24/7. They don't want breaks in between. They don't complain about working on the Saturday or on the Sunday. They just go on and go on. And that is a risk. If we miss that train, then we not only have the problem that suddenly we're faced with a lack of opportunities for that labor force that is there currently, and there's not sufficient employment opportunities anyway. So we need to ensure that we train these people so that they can manage those digital solutions here, that they can come up with those digital solutions here compared to the Western world or so. And that is where I think the role profile also as a freight forwarder changes, because you don't need to be, you don't need to know all the port pairs, or you don't need to have a handbook or a database that you know what's the import requirement for shipment into Brazil, or what is the dangerous goods specifications for a certain category of commodity, because the system will know all of that. What we need is, on the one hand, this system expertise, people who can make use of the data and who can manage that data, because this will then in turn allow us to much better serve our customers. Also, someone said it earlier, we need to come into more predictive analytics, right? Today, we are too often still in a situation where we have to tell customers, oh, sorry, we also weren't aware, this just happened, there was a ship that blocked the Suez Canal, so well, now everything is blocked and nothing is moving, so we just have to sit it out and wait. If you have more data and if you adequately manage it and analyze it, you can come to much better predictions that help customers in the end. And I think that's what the future of our trade is, to a certain degree, that the human intervention with customers will be more on exception management, on solution development, on really adding value. Because I mean, let's face it, transporting a container from A to B today is not rocket science, right? It's standardized. It's a very, very commoditized, but the value add really comes when there's exception management, when there's additional solutions, when we provide that customer service there. And that's a need where I see the change in also the role profiles and the requirements that we have towards our people.
No, thank you so much, Nikki. I think we suddenly started to realize the importance of people so much in COVID, because earlier in India, traditionally, Vivek and Vaibhav and APR agree that if there are a certain set of people, they come from a certain stage. In the shipping industry, we would see a lot of people from Kerala actually being there in a particular industry. Similarly, people from Bihar would look at one part of it. The IT industry would come from south part of it, and you were very comfortable to go to other cities in terms of travel and rest of them. But what COVID has done is that you want to be as close to your home and find a job which is closer to your home. And which basically means that you need to start looking at your talent pool in many ways very differently from what it is. And to answer to, or probably to comment on your aspect of RPA, I fully agree for a reason is that earlier we had this challenge of if that lady goes on a maternity leave, who will send the shipment status out? Or, if there is a holiday, will the DSR be sent to the customer and will the Excel spreadsheet be updated? And today with what you get is so automated that you don't even need to really worry about it, and for which you don't need to pay someone a huge salary and deploy them. I think that's a thing which is a reality now. We are seeing more and more that happening. And probably Vivek and Vaibhav also can comment on anything in respect to the manpower. So I'll ask Vivek first, what is his take on the manpower and the talent pool, probably in terms of shortage or in terms of imbalance of people availability now, because you suddenly see consultants very busy in the market nowadays. Vivek, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, so I think the challenge today, I mean, I think it's a very important point which Nikki has brought out about the manpower and the training and how the technologies are taking over the job which was hitherto done by people, and how going forward it is going to be only exception management. The challenge today in the context of COVID is one is this automation and standardization standardization will help automation, and automation will help us in the course of automation technologies like RPA, robotic process automation can be implemented. So yes, I mean it is all going happening very slowly. Coming to the specific question of manpower, see what has happened in the COVID period is how do you train manpower? Because earlier on the learning happened in a office physical environment. There was a lot of peer learning, right? You as a newcomer, you sat next to somebody who was experienced, and then he showed you as to how to go, do things in the right way. Of course, you had your orientation program, and you were introduced to the basic concepts of shipping or whatever, depending on what profile you had. So this peer learning is not happening now, and that is making a little difficult for organizations, especially large organizations like us. I think DHL, everybody will say, how do you get manpower who are trained? Because training is getting freshers and training them, it is becoming a little difficult, if not impossible. So what is happening is, as you rightly said, that is keeping the manpower consultants busy, because they're busy trying to pick up from one guy and supply to the other guy. So that is it's a challenge. So what we have as an organization, I mean, I will share our personal experiences with you, is we have heavily invested. We have been traditionally for the last 3-4 years actually into LMS, learning management systems. So we have 110 different kinds of job related, technical as well as skill related, especially to our be it soft skills or be it documentation related, hazardous cargo handling, whatever, all different kinds of, we have the LMS modules which we have created. So that is helping us train our manpower from a remote location. And that is kind of a, if not 100% replacement for so-called chalk and talk learning or so-called peer learning. It is better than not somebody having to explain things to you on using a Zoom line or a WebEx line. So LMS is something, I think that is will have to, a lot of organizations will have to get into that mode, if not already, or then there will be service providers who will specialize into, like we have 21cc Education, who is in the shipping industry. They are trying to do this, they are created learning management solution platform and trying to give training to people, and it is becoming relevant now. So that is the I don't have a real clear answer when it comes to how to alleviate the problem of manpower training, but these are some of the possible solutions which are under implementation and which have been giving fairly decent results.
No, good. I think you've given quite a bit of inputs, and there's no standard answer to your manpower and training, and each organization has a different views in it. And I know I've been interacting with Vaibhav, and one of the current challenges is that it's like finding the right wife in your life. Is there a standard solution to it? I would say no. And you can't learn better than from learning from your wife on a day-to-day. Same is it. So maybe Vaibhav, given the current challenges, that one end you need really people who can think towards the other end or the horizon of the real IT world coming in, and the rest of them, to being a family-owned organization where you have traditionally people who have been there for 30 or 40 years, who have a traditional way of functioning, and changing them is not easy. And because I come from also equally an old school of thought at some point of time, and so my children think I'm sometimes outdated, but I know that their expectation is. So how do you probably as an organization really look at this in a long-term basis?
So, I mean, there were thoughts attached to this as a third generation family business member. When you came back, and again, I did my undergraduate in the US, and then I came back in, I had a very different viewpoint towards this question, which obviously evolved over 10 years. And honestly, in the last 2 years of the pandemic, this has evolved drastically, because while there was digitization and there was a drive towards digitization, centralized operation and centralized working, I bet all of us have seen how transactional business became in the last 2 years. And the business was done on the ground. Whether it is fighting for space on carriers, or whether it was getting bookings, whether it was making bookings, multiple bookings on the carriers to get space. I mean, so the question became, is the people who know the tricks of the trade and the business and how it is done, to be able to do business, because this is a challenge that is real and it is here. It is something where you are also working towards, how do I say this, challenging or working the system, really. I mean, you're working the system to get results. You have contracts, but nobody's being able to honor those contracts. You're going in there for spot bookings to be able to go on to each and every. So you need manpower to do that, but you need people who know the system to do that. So guys who've been in the play for decades, or probably know the business and how it's operated, were coming in and telling you that, look, this is how you need to operate in this scenario to be able to be fitter than your competition, right? And they knew it because they were on ground and they've seen this kind of a fiasco before. So they have seen in their 30 years or 20 years a fiasco where there was port congestions in the past and there was an overload in the air side, because there's no repository of this information anywhere. I mean, which handbook or which training manual has crisis management to this degree put aside? There was a lot of experience that came in, and then there was youth to execute this, because you needed somebody to be the feet on ground, to be able to go in there. In fact, to some extent, even forget what they've learned in their studies or whatever, to come in and say, look, now you got to understand that, look, you're on ground and you're at the forefront of war right now to get a container. I mean, it's how do you get that container, and how do you make sure the competition doesn't get it, or how do you get that space on that limited flight that's going to operate out of here, and the other person's not? How do you meet your transit? How do you meet your conditions? So I saw the gelling of generations coming together in this pandemic time period. There was so much knowledge that was given and shared with the experience to the new talent that was coming in. So it really makes you question what should be your way forward, because like you said, digitization is the future. And you can see the carriers, airlines, everybody going into digitization, there's standardization. And as Nikki also mentioned, like I mentioned before as well, we are literally a commoditized industry. It literally is downright commoditized. There's a tariffized operation that is there on the air side. There is literally a digital approach or push towards the ocean business as well now. Literally, okay, you can have some sort of a human interface, or the specialization that comes in, the value addition that comes in on the pre and post side of things. But when you talk about the haulage or the line haul is literally what is commoditized today, and the customers guide you on what needs to be done. But all that went out of the window in the last 2 years because businesses were challenged and operations were challenged. And I see more of this happening in time to come. Geopolitical situations are going to play a larger part in supply chain management and planning. There is going to be reasons geopolitical reasons why airlines will be challenged on fifth freedom rights across countries and whether they're going to come in or not come in. There are going to be reasons with which carriers will either put in more vessels towards China, US, because they feel, again, at the end of the day, it's a challenge of profitability where everybody, it's survival of the fittest. And it's also the challenge which is in the ecosystem or political ecosystem that exists. So there is no right question, there's no right answer. Like you said, it's something that probably I ask my wife, she'll be able to tell me the right answer because she has the answer to everything. But in this scenario, talent remains to be a big dilemma. And then, like I've been discussing with you as well, I don't know where does it begin to, you actually need to teach talent how to apply themselves is what I feel. It's really not about what you know or how you know it, because every working environment is different. As Continental, I would be different, PHL would be different, Agility would be different, Team all companies would come in, with a different ecosystem because they each have different infrastructure available to their need and requirement. And that uniqueness is true to each organization that drives its success and its growth. Now, every organization is not the same, so there's not going to be standardization that's going to be across with regard to talent and what talent should do, how it should operate. It's really the application of what all you know and what is around you to be able to do things. Nobody talks about the EQ of teams. EQ is such an important part in getting things done in an ecosystem where there is still, well, again, people, process, technology. Technology obviously reduces friction, but the people are still the people. They're going to be needed to handle the processes and technology to a large extent as we move along. So talent has to be built or conditioned to be handling the emotional challenges of operating internally with the internal customers and externally with external customers. And this is something that I've not seen across any organization today. This is something that you learn on the go, but I feel it's a very relevant task, and that's somewhere I personally would like to focus on within my organization as well, because I feel that is what's going to differentiate the level of friction. I mean, friction could be one unplanned shipment or one unplanned job to 100 which come from a customer or B, your internal focal point. So how do you handle those pressures? How do you work around it is what will define the talent and how they evolve as we grow forward. And again, skilling remains to be a large part, where I personally believe skilling happens while you're on the play as well, and while you're on the job as well, whether it is utilizing the tools that are given to you in terms of automation. So the people who make the tools or design the tools, the blueprinting team is obviously a tech savvy team, but how to use those tools is also an art that literally people who see the relevance of these tools can do. And I've seen this with talent who are 30 years, 40 years in the game, and I would say were traditionally digitally illiterate, are now loving these MIS reports that are coming out their way because it's making their life easier.
Thanks, Vaibhav. I think this is a very important subject for a reason, is that the situation is becoming like the climate where IMD gets their forecast absolutely wrong and say the monsoon is coming on so-and-so date. And then if you remember the good olden days of All India Radio, someone would say, he would put his hand out of the window and check if it's wet and say, yeah, it's going to rain tomorrow. But I think with people, what is also happening is that your expectation as an employer is increasing, and their expectation out of the employer also is started to increase much more because of the visibility that is available in the new world, and the millennium kids' restlessness towards growth coming in every 1 year. They would think the promotion orders should be coming out from the bosses. I think we are seeing multiple levels of challenges in terms of people, and why that becomes more important and why APR's inputs are also critical is that trucking is the last thing that people want to be doing, unfortunately. And without the truckers, we have no role to play in the whole supply chain. If you ask me today, the grassroots level, everything that is done is how well your educated your truckers are, how competent and how skillful they are. Because having lived in so many countries, and in South Africa, I used to be surprised at the level of knowledge that the truckers used to have in terms of how to pull out an pallet from the airport. They never needed helpers. To where in India today, you have a situation where you have a trucker, you have a helper, and then you have someone who goes to the airport, probably to give them the documents as well. So maybe APR, you can really give us more insights in terms of what talent pool and what probably governments should be doing in terms of helping this whole cause.
Thanks, Satish. So this is again a cause very dear to my heart, since I'm passionate about the subject of supply chain, not because I work in this field, but fortunately I'm amongst the few people who got to choose this field. Yeah? So I've been speaking about this for more than 20 years, and I was tired of speaking about this for more than 20 years because I couldn't see visible change that could actually positively impact. Yeah. So we have our IIMs, we have our IITs, we have our ITIs, and it is just not helping the entire ecosystem of supply chain, because again, there's a lot of disconnectedness in this story. So I was actually waiting for this opportunity, and it sort of came knocking. So what is really, really important here that I see, yes, government needs to drive a lot of this initiative, but we as private players need to support these initiatives as well in terms of internships. I know a couple of countries have this sort of a mandate that their citizens should be part of the armed forces within a certain stipulated time, and maybe once or twice in their lifetime or thrice in their lifetime. Right? We don't really have a mandate like that, but if we could use that as a learning and have a mandate for the operators in the field of supply chain, be it trucking, warehousing, or whatever, all the fields, that these are the students that are going to come out of these colleges where the following will be taught, and that following would of course have to be again jointly worked out with the operators, that what do you want in terms of knowledge, right? So what do you need, what do you want is taught, and then these people get an on-the-job training opportunity, an internship opportunity, precisely to what our operations are. And like Vaibhav was mentioning about applicability or implementation of that knowledge, that will come from there, because unless and until we educate them, they would not know what we need. And there has to be a bit of initiative from people to apply their learnings as well, right? So I think that's a process of genetic mutation that none of us are probably good at, yeah, and it's a long drawn process. But I believe this can work out because I've been working with a lot of associations, one of which is the Asha Impact Foundation. And Asha Impact is working with the Delhi University, and we've recently designed a course curriculum for logistics for bachelors. And along with me, there are a few other corporate representatives in that, and we've told them exactly what we need in people. Now, once they're out from there, the expectation from the government, from DU, is that they're not jobless. They get an opportunity. So internship is the best opportunity, or management training programs are the best opportunities. And after that, if they don't really apply what they've learned, or if their EQ is poor, then God help them. Then we can't do anything about it, right? So we will have to try our best in terms of building that. Investment in talent development is very, very critical. I think it is always left out. So government is giving a lot of subsidies on training and learning and development through the NSDC, National Skill Development Council. And under NSDC, you have LSC, which is the Logistics Skills Council. So if you want to set up a training institute within DHL, within Continental, within Varuna, wherever, yeah, so they are willing to support on that with a decent subsidy. And apart from investments, I think investments in training, it is also important to have trainers trained well. Yeah, because if today incidentally is Guru Purnima, so thank you all for helping me learn. Yeah, so and the word guru, the trainer, yeah, that trainer needs to be good enough to be able to train you what to do right. Yeah. So I think that is an area of focus. That should be an area of focus as well. And if we continue to work in silos, I don't think so we will be able to reach anywhere. So working closely with the government is required. Government is doing a lot of things, like Satish was mentioning. There are knowledge partners, and those knowledge partners are seeking knowledge from us, and then it goes on to a PPT and presented to the government, right? So if even if that be the way, I believe that the government is now looking at corporates and private operators very, very differently than before. And we, like, for example, I am personally sitting on that committee where we sit with the Secretary of Logistics and talk about what can go in and go out of the national logistics policy. So and there are people like me who are there, people who understand this space, and we in fact even seek advices from others who probably know better than us on a few parameters, but are not representing their companies in that room. Yeah, so that has started. Satish, Vaibhav, Nikki, and Vivek, that has already started. The pace will determine how soon we reach there. But from our side, from the private operator side, I think we need to be able to commit not only an investment in training and people development, but also being able to design course curriculums. We should take active interest and participation in doing that, is my message to all of us. Yeah.
No, thanks. I think Nikki has some inputs, but you clearly touched upon some important aspects in terms of the investment in talent pool and the other aspect of the National Skill Development Council, LSCs, because I'm also in touch with Captain Ramanujam and the rest of them equally involved. The train the trainer aspect that you touched upon, corporates being involved, seek advice. So incidentally, I've been the advisor both for logistics for the FTCCI, which is Federation of Telangana Chamber and Commerce, and that's how the policy for logistics also came. And I said, we may not be able to do it for multiple states. Keep it simple and focused. Take at least one state at a time. Make that as a model rather than trying to be everywhere and end up being not even at one place. So that's how I think if all of us can take even one state at a time and contribute, it could make a lot of difference. So over to you, Nikki, for your additional inputs.
Yeah, just adding one additional thought and building on what APR and Vaibhav and you said. I think we also need a clear perspective as to what the future jobs are, right? I mean, not just related to data science, but also to the existing profile. So you spoke about the truckers, right? Truckers, in my perspective, are very important and will remain very important. I think it'll take a very long time until we have automated commercial vehicles driving, without a driver there. But you also mentioned, the guy who helps the driver load or offload the truck, and the runner boy who just brings the paperwork. And I think this in conjunction with government policies, with efforts to digitize, standardize, I think there's a clear perspective that certain jobs are no longer needed in the future, right? I mean, even today, you would not need a runner boy who just brings a piece of paper from A to B. You can substitute that through digital means, which will not only increase the efficiency, but also the accuracy, the safety, etc. But then there are other jobs like that of the truck driver, which will remain important in the future. I think together with the input from the industry, and then with government policies and learning institutes, training institutes, all the bodies that API also referred to, we need to come up with a picture as to what are the different roles that will be there in logistics in the future, and which of them will see more intensity or more requirements and others not. And then we can also adapt these learning curriculums, the training courses, the trainers towards that, to make sure that we get a sufficient supply of those people in the future.
No, brilliant. I think with no disrespect to anyone, the first thing that everyone looks is for good salespeople, and that's probably the highest thing in the shortage. Everyone thinks the sales are going to do wonders, but if you have a strong product which sells by itself, probably you need lesser salespeople. So it is a wise decision is that you have to invest in people, because if you ask the CFO, he says if the guy runs away, then what? But if you don't train him and he damages the
He stays back.
customer's shipment at the same time, then it's a crazy situation. So I have this debate always with HR, and I hope my HR is not listening to me today, but I always have this debate of saying is that, it's so critical to train people. And if he leaves, he leaves. He leaves at least on a good note that I was trained in DHL or in agility or in thing, and I learned it here. And he will remember you for a good thing, and he would say this industry spends money on training, and having qualified trained people is always good. And I think so. You all have touched upon the future jobs, Nikki. I'm not able to predict myself what are the future jobs, barring a few that we can look at. Really, data analytics is something which is a big on a subject. And how can we deploy technology? Because today people talk about blockchain, IoT, robotic process automation, and data analytics as the word bird. And how much is that going to impact us, or is already impacting us, is a big question. And how much of is it India really adopting when compared to not only the Western world or the Asia aspect of it? Because we still have the liberty of the manpower being not so expensive. But as I see the next 2-3 years, the biggest challenge that we will have is the Indian manpower is no more going to be economic, because you have venture capitalists who are ready to come in and invest and are ready to say, look, I just need my technical share valuation to go up. So what do we do as traditional players? Maybe APR is raising his hand and then may come out and give his comments before I go back to all of you for the last bit of
Just a quick one, Satish. You mentioned about the cost of people, right?
Yes.
So I think we've as supply chain practitioners and as a country also, we've evolved immensely, right? In our thought processes, in terms of efficiency and optimization, we've evolved. We should definitely pat our backs, for that. And why I say that is that it is not only about cost; it is also about accuracy, data accuracy. Yeah. So if I have a runner boy taking a piece of paper and moving from point A to point B, which is a completely non-efficient exercise, that paper is handwritten. Yeah, it has something on it, yeah, scribbled on it. Yeah. If it is digitized, then there's no editing happening, right? So it's far more accurate in terms of information. Secondly, if that runner boy is not pushed towards the edge, that dude, you need to stop running and stop using your brains, the EQ part of it, right? So skill yourself, yeah, upskill yourself, and maybe start monitoring the control tower, yeah, because ultimately we humans have to watch the movement on that control tower panel, right? So jobs, a lot of jobs will stay, but the ones that are going to be redundant are going to be jobs that are not adding value and are not helping us be more accurate and more transparent and more optimum. Yeah. So that's the only view I wanted to add, Satish.
Perfect. No, but I also want to come back to Vivek, because he touched upon East India's and the part of it. And one aspect that's critical for the whole Asia is how is the connectivity in terms of inland waters and also the road aspect. For a reason is that Nikki knows for sure, or all of us know, that in Europe the biggest connectivity is the road connectivity between the 40 odd countries or 56 odd countries within the Europe. Whereas today, if you have to drive from Singapore to Thailand through Bangladesh and come into North Delhi, which is a dream that I would probably want to do using an Atmanirbhar made Mahindra car or Scorpio, is far from difficult. This is the reality. And we need to accept this reality is that we've been talking about this subject for not now, because people want you to do a webinar on the role of Asia and the value that it comes in. But instead of paying huge ocean freight, if today you would have had the opportunity of putting the auto components which need to be fitted into any of your car, you don't need to fight for a space of a container at Lam Shabang and then plead and beg and say, put it on a faster transit time. But if that could happen, and where do you think that is, and where do we, what do we do on that aspect with it? Vivek, you are muted.
Yeah. Again, I'm in mute. So one is just on the previous point on the manpower. I just wanted to highlight that I think retaining your talent at the moment is I think an important aspect of it. And as you mentioned about increase in manpower cost, so I think a lot of the manpower cost is going to go up in the next 2-3 years because we are trying to retain existing talent. Because there is, as I mentioned, the training, the new talent coming in, the training happening, and people becoming experienced enough to handle all kinds of crises, as Weber pointed, are far and few. And if you have people like that in your organization, you have to retain them, and then to retain them at a cost, and that's also is going to drive up the cost of manpower. One of the things that's going to happen. So when it was remark was made that in the Indian context by you, Satish, that the manpower is not going to be cheap. Yes, it is not going to be cheap. And as you speak, the manpower costs are going up, especially the people who have the right experience and who are capable of handling all kinds of situations, handling technology, handling crisis, handling people, training people, giving solutions. So yeah, so so retention and at a cost is something that all business leaders need to be ready. Coming to the connectivity within South Asia and our adjoining countries. So I think traditionally we never looked at our neighbors very because the entire history of South Asia is basically a division of British Empire, and the British also demographically, religiously, there is a lot of disparity, and that and where there is no disparity in terms of religion, there is a disparity in terms of geography. I mean, if you say Nepal and Bhutan, they are high up in the mountain in the Himalayas, whereas if you see India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, where the population is divided on lines of religion. So although we had SARC, which was there, South Asia Association for Regional Cooperation, for a very long time, they never concentrated on having the economic activity going up. I think it was the association was limited to cultural exchange, and some people traveling, artists traveling from each other, and we holding some programs, cultural programs, like the way European Union or European economic cooperation that happened in South Asia. The cooperation has really not happened because I think there is a lot of I think the homogeneity in terms of thought process towards each other in every country is very different, because every country has their own challenges. And of course, Asia has traditionally been, to a certain extent, of the large powers, a playground, because when there were when there was communism versus capitalism fight happening between Russia and the US, people wanted to have dominance, and then that's how everybody was trying to use South Asia and a lot of other countries also globally into the power play. So what happened was we never really got down to talking to each other and trying to find solutions to our problem. We always looked at West for our solutions. So be it economic growth also, we thought when we export to Europe or US, we will get more value. We never looked at, can we export to Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Sri Lanka, and can we have, some collaboration happening between our countries so that we can. Each and every country in South Asia has their own strength in terms of population, in terms of skill sets, in terms of natural resources. So there was no unified approach to harnessing these resources, be it manpower resources or be it natural resources, and that's how that the connectivity was never established. Now it's only during the last 2 successive governments we are talking about the connectivity to Northeast, connectivity to the river route into Bangladesh, and of course there have been certain progress, but not to a large extent. Where we are looking at also Burma to a certain extent of connecting using the Sitwe port into the northeast part of it. But that's only limited to India. But when the BIMSTEC initiative, which is supposed to connect the Asia, South Asia, as well as East Asia to a certain extent, Southeast Asia, that is really not taking off, and that can also help us find solutions to a lot of our problems. When we we recently heard something very interesting about how a train from Scandinavia, has departed for India and is going to come, from Central Asia here to India within 21 days or something like that. Can we look at some initiatives which have train connectivity, between India to and the road connectivity? Because geographically, we have it's very heterogeneous. We have a lot of rivers, we have a lot of forests, that is on the east part of India, and penetrating them is not difficult, or it's not impossible, but it's quite difficult, and it requires a huge amount of resources for that. And government will put in resources if they see economic and benefit out of it. So I think the economic benefit is still not been seen. But today, when we speak about our freight rates from Southeast Asia to India, in $1,000+ or $2,000, $3,000, then it will make sense, because earlier on they were always into $300, $400, $500. That really did not require a need of an alternative mode of transport to move those goods. But now, when the ocean freight rates goes up, then there will be thought process of whether this thing can be connected. So I think connecting the Northeast via Bangladesh, we have set the trend. Also, some, as I mentioned, we are also looking at Burma route also. So once this is established in the next couple of 2, 3, 4 years, and then we will, connectivity wise, we will be closer to Southeast Asia. And then, talking about connecting Singapore or driving into Singapore, driving into Thailand, will become a reality. So I think let us reach our eastern side as first step. Once that connectivity is established, then we go a little further and connect to the Southeast Asian countries. That's how it may evolve in coming years. That would be my some thoughts on the subject matter.
No, which is why I addressed this question to you very clearly, because I followed DHL and Nicky Frank closely for a reason, is that I was going through their report on air product for June and ocean product as well. I don't think Nicky is predicted, or his company is predicted, the freight rates are going to drop down by any means anywhere. And everyone is only talking about increases. And if that is the case, and if government is spending so much of money, and if you consolidate the amount of ocean freight amount paid on every container and put it as a number, and see if you don't look at these new alternatives, then it's going to be difficult, because at certain stage, you can't keep increasing your product price to a price where you say that it's not a basic commodity or a commodity, because your air conditioners, which were probably 21, 22,000, today I don't know whether 37 to 43,000 also you will get a 1.5 ton split really. But then it's become a necessity, because you can't take the heat. But then if you continue the cost to keep going up, then some products may not even be on the shelf in the days to come. And that is something which, all of us realize that Vaibhav touched in the starting on the aspect of cash flow. If you have to really bring the cash flows, you can't keep borrowing from bank and keep giving customers 90 days credit. We will have to put more credit controllers. I'm sure Nicky will have this problem as much I have today, is that if I go to my CFO, he says, don't take any more business from X company, because what is the point? Because we're only going to fund it much more. But then the customers also have their own challenges. And I think which is why I wanted your thoughts, which you brought out very nicely. It has to start. And the Bangladesh-India thing is happening because we move a lot of garments from Bangladesh into Calcutta and uplift them out into Spain and other countries. So at least during Vandana Agarwal's regime, we could see that happening clearly. And I hope in the new economic advisor, whoever he is also looking at this important aspect. I think
I wanted to highlight here is, I think the low-hanging fruit is using port of Mundra and Pipavav and Nhava Sheva for Bangladesh exports. There's only one challenge of equipment imbalance. What goes into Bangladesh is all 20 footers. What comes out of it is all 40 footers. So there is a rail connectivity up to Dhaka, just before Dhaka, about 60 kilometers off Dhaka, and there's a rail terminal. But nobody has really put in efforts to ensure that there's a regular block train that moves from there. And the congestion and the freight rates today, $10,000, $12,000 40 footer into into Europe. It is easy for people to justify railing it down to Mundra or JNPT. The railway line exists. It is a broad gauge line. It is just a matter of having the right paperwork and process in place, and the goods can start moving. In fact, the goods can now also move into 20 footers. We can rework them and put into 40 footer. It will still be cheaper than moving it out of Chittagong into Europe. So I think that is a low hanging fruit. And if any government officials are listening to us, or if PhD chamber can take that initiative, I think that really needs to be pushed, and that can yield immediate results.
Brilliant. So I think we are at the last 9 minutes, because 4 o'clock is when we are supposed to be closing. So what I will request is that your last closing comments, starting with Nikki, and then followed by Vaibhav and APR. And if Vivek wants to still add, then I'll summarize and we can close.
Great.
Over to
Yeah.
Nikki.
Thanks a lot, Satish, for the great discussion. I think we've covered a really broad spectrum of topics around the industry, the current situation, some historic aspects, as well as a lot of future aspects. I mean, my takeaway is we certainly have challenges ahead of us. It's not it's not going to be a straightforward, easy walk in the park, but I think it's going to be very exciting. For me, logistics is my chosen profession, like yours, and I see the future of logistics very positively, because there's a fundamental role in driving growth, driving trade, driving wealth and prosperity. And we've proven, not just in the past, also in the recent past over the pandemic, that we are very good at overcoming challenges and new problems. And I'm pretty sure also for several of the topics we discussed today, we as an industry, together with the support of governments and our employees, will find the right solutions. So I'm pretty positive about our future there.
Brilliant. Thanks. So Vaibhav, over to you.
No, Satish, I think it's been a very engaging conversation today, and I must say, from where Nikki left off, I think it's probably never been a more interesting time to be in logistics as it is now, and especially I can speak for myself as Continental, with the company having its roots in Asia. It's the time for Asia. As you can see, there is opportunity. There is a lot that is possible today that really wasn't possible maybe a decade ago. With the shift focusing into the region, with consumerism being driven in the region, and also manufacturing and other elements that are all getting, that are all being developed. And us, and one more point I was mentioned, an ability to leapfrog into technology and take into what is latest, and then bringing that implementation in today's ecosystem is what's the most important, and which is the most interesting part, I would say, because it's always a fun day when you're probably skipping over generations of I guess there's no point reinventing the wheel, but when you're going to take over from what somebody's already done and do the reverse engineering to implement it here today, there's a lot of fun, there are a lot of challenges, but that's where the prospects lie. So, pleasure to learn more from the panel today, and look forward to more engagements in the future to learn more.
Sure. Great. Maybe APR, your...
Satish, and I think excellent comments, and again, knowledge from everyone. Vivek, Nikki, Vaibhav, thanks a lot. Satish put it up very well. Just a few closing thoughts. I think I spoke about transparency, standardization, predictability, talent development. There were, I think the why is also very important, right? So if I have to just sum it up in a few words. So transparency, why? Because it will improve your visibility, inventory visibility, through warehouses, transportation, secondary distribution, overall in the supply chain. So your demand and supply gaps can be sort of reduced. That happens, you will of course save money. That is what all our customers want. I don't know one customer that Weber would know, Nikki would know. They'll say, please be my guest, take some extra money. Everybody will want to reduce their money year on year, right? So transparency will help build that. Standardization, whether it be pallets, trucks, vendors. If you really look at it, you can't compare apples with shampoo. Yeah? Apples have to be compared with apples. So you've got to have the right grading of vendors and pallets, and standardization therefore becomes very, very key. And value of that product is therefore determined by standardization. You can't fly business class and say, can I pay for a rail ticket? Yeah, so that will not happen. So standardization important. Training, like Sadishu mentioned, our CFOs or investors can always ask this, what if they go away? And my question back to them is, what if they stay? Yeah. if they don't get trained and they stay, I think that is something that I dread, and that gives me shivers. Yeah, that I have untrained resources who are going to be a burden on the balance sheet, right? If I look at ROCE, yeah, because ultimately all of us are working for that. Cash flow finally translates to return on capital employed. If that can be made faster through faster inventory turns, faster transit times, like what we do here at Varuna, our focus, our mission statement is, improving your inventory turns, right, for customers. So be it digitization, so anything and everything that is helping us make that product that was manufactured sell faster in the market. The reach to market has to be faster, right? And tech plays a massive role in that. So these were some of my points, Satish, and I certainly believe that if standardization, transparency, all of these are worked upon jointly with the government, jointly with the associations, jointly with my cooperators, and then real cooperation will happen. Yeah, and then that will help every one of us benefit. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Vivek, do you want to give your last bit or?
Not really. I mean, it's a very well conducted.
No.
Yeah.
Good.
Perfect.
I think quickly to summarize, given the topic that was given to us, Asia, the highway of value for global logistics, is quite a wide and open subject. But I think we've factored into the aspect clearly and brought it into a few buckets. One, Asia undoubtedly will be and continue to be the major hub, and we will continue to see traction and action happening here at all throughout. Someone like Vaibhav said, at least I and Nikki are sure that we've got job for another 10 years to go surely, because this industry is continue to be there, which means I may end up doing more webinars than what I'm doing in the coming days as well, which is okay, but I get to learn with every webinar because I have to prepare as well. Next, challenges ahead. Surely, yes, we are seeing more challenges, but I think we have seen resilience, we've seen agility, we've seen a lot of solution finding in these crises, and which is a good thing which Nikki mentioned. Opportunities are there. What we did for the last 30 years or 3 decades, like what Vaibhav said, has completely changed or got undone in the last 2 years or so, beyond doubt. Consumers' expectations have gone up drastically. Deploying technology is going to be definitely see a larger area which we are seeing. Then training, importance of standardization. We spoke about cash flow, we spoke about ROC, and what came out from Vivek clearly was the aspect of the historical thing of this country being starting from the east, and the diplomacy not being to the best of the extent, but I think the current government is looking at it, and that is where the role of PhD also would come into, is that some of the points that have been discussed probably should be taken up. And I now hand it over back to Ajay Bansal. I think sharp at 4 o'clock. I have the pleasure to conclude this session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And it's been very nicely conducted, sir. And we have that privilege to hear all the expert views from all the panelists. And surely, sir, we will summarize all the detailings which has been discussed during the session, and we'll share it with you. If you would like to add on something into it, so you can let us know before compiling it and submitting it to the ministry, so we can take up those points which has been mentioned during the discussions. We'll do that. Perfect. And once again, sir, we'll thank all the panelists for sparing their time and sharing their expert views on the subject, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.